Ethan Parker didn't discover his wife was cheating. He discovered she was planning to erase him from his own life. And the worst part? The man helping her do it wasn't a stranger. It was someone Ethan trusted more than almost anyone in the world. Someone who had stood beside him on the most important day of his life. It all started with something simple. A shared family iPad. One notification. One name. And a message that wasn't meant for him to see. But once Ethan opened that message, his entire world began to unravel. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Denver. The kind of quiet that almost never happened anymore. Laura had taken their 9-year-old daughter Emma to a birthday party across town, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan had the house to himself. The sunlight streamed through the living room windows. The television was off. The house felt calm. Normal. Ethan sat down on the couch with a cup of coffee and grabbed the family iPad from the coffee table. It was the household device. Everyone used it. Laura used it for recipes and online shopping. Emma used it for games and cartoons. Ethan used it to check emails and pay bills. Nothing unusual. Just another quiet Sunday. The screen lit up in his hands. A message notification appeared at the top of the screen. Contact name. D. Redhart. Ethan frowned slightly. He didn't recognize the name. Maybe one of Laura's friends. Maybe someone from work. He almost ignored it. But curiosity nudged him. So he tapped the Messages app. The conversation opened. The newest message sat at the bottom of the screen. I hate pretending to love him. Ethan blinked. For a moment he thought he misunderstood. Maybe the message was about someone else. Maybe it was part of some conversation he didn't understand. He scrolled up. Another message appeared. Once everything is signed, we'll finally be free of him. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Free of him? What did that mean? He kept scrolling. The conversation stretched back weeks. Dozens of messages. And the deeper Ethan read, the worse it became. Laura had written earlier that morning. He still thinks we're happy. It's almost embarrassing how easy he is to fool. A reply appeared beneath it. Good. The longer he trusts us, the easier this gets. Ethan's fingers froze against the screen. His heart started beating harder. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't harmless flirting. Something serious was happening here. Something dangerous. He continued reading. Another message appeared. Did he sign the refinance papers yet? The reply came quickly. Not yet. But he will. Just keep encouraging him. He always listens to you. Ethan stared at the screen. Refinance papers? They were talking about his house. His chest tightened. Laura had been encouraging him for weeks to refinance. She said the interest rates were better. She said it was a smart financial move. Now the conversation took a darker turn. Laura wrote, once the house is under my name, I'll divorce him. Ethan's hand began to shake. A moment later the reply appeared. And we split everything. The house. The savings. All of it. Ethan whispered to the empty room. What the hell is this? At first he assumed the obvious. Laura was having an affair. The messages sounded intimate. Secretive. Cruel. But something about the conversation didn't feel like a normal affair. This person knew too much. They knew about Ethan's finances. His savings accounts. His retirement investments. Even the private discussions Ethan had been having about refinancing the house. Only a few people knew those details. Very few. Ethan opened the contact information. His pulse was racing now. He tapped the phone number attached to the contact. And suddenly, the room felt ice cold. Because he knew that number. He had known it his entire life. The contact wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a coworker. It wasn't an old boyfriend. The number belonged to Daniel Parker. Ethan's younger brother. Ethan dropped the iPad onto the couch. No. His voice sounded hollow in the empty room. That's not possible. Daniel? His little brother? The kid Ethan used to protect during school fights. The man who stood beside him as best man at his wedding. The uncle who bought Emma birthday gifts every year. It didn't make sense. But the proof was sitting on the screen. Ethan slowly picked the iPad back up. He needed to be sure. He scrolled further up the conversation. And then he saw the message that erased any doubt. Daniel had written, dinner tomorrow? Same place as last time. Laura replied, only if you stop acting nervous when Ethan talks about you. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. The two people he trusted most in the world were betraying him together. Suddenly a memory surfaced in Ethan's mind. 3 months earlier. A warm summer evening. They had hosted a barbecue in the backyard. Emma was running across the grass with Daniel, laughing while he tried to teach her how to throw a baseball. Laura stood beside Ethan near the grill. She handed him a cold drink and smiled. "Your brother is such a good uncle," she said. Ethan laughed. "Yeah. He's always been loyal." Daniel looked up from the yard and grinned. "Always, big brother?" At the time, Ethan had felt proud. Proud of his family. Proud of the bond they shared. Now that memory felt poisoned. Because the entire time, they had been lying to him. Ethan forced himself to keep reading. The deeper he went, the more calculated the plan appeared. Laura wrote, "You need to push the investment idea again." Daniel replied, "Relax. He trusts me. I'll convince him." Suddenly Ethan remembered the phone call from 2 weeks earlier. Daniel had sounded excited. He talked about a real estate investment opportunity. All Ethan had to do was refinance the house to free up capital. Daniel promised the return would be huge. At the time, Ethan thought his brother was just trying to help. Now he understood. The refinance wasn't an investment. It was the final step in their plan. Once the house was refinanced, Laura would control the assets. Then she would divorce him and walk away with half of everything. Maybe more. Ethan sat silently on the couch for a long time. The anger inside him grew slowly, but he forced himself to stay calm. If he confronted them now, they would deny everything. They would hide the evidence. Instead, Ethan started taking screenshots, one after another. Every message, every cruel joke they made about him, every part of their plan. One message hit harder than the rest. Laura wrote, "Sometimes I feel bad. But then I remember how boring he is." Daniel replied with laughing emojis. Ethan stared at that message for a long time. Then he whispered quietly, "You two just made the biggest mistake of your lives." 2 weeks passed. Ethan didn't say a word. He acted completely normal. He smiled. He laughed. He pretended nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, he spoke to a lawyer. He moved money. He made quiet legal changes. And then, he set the trap. One Friday evening, Ethan invited Daniel over for dinner. Everything looked normal. Laura cooked steak. Daniel brought a bottle of wine. Emma sat at the table talking about school. The atmosphere felt comfortable, like a normal family dinner. But Ethan watched everything carefully. The secret glances between Laura and Daniel. The subtle tension in their voices. Halfway through dinner, Emma went upstairs to finish homework. That's when Daniel finally spoke. "So," he took a sip of wine. "About that investment opportunity." Ethan nodded slowly. Daniel leaned forward. "All you have to do is refinance the house. The paperwork is ready. It's honestly a great deal." Laura jumped in quickly. "It really is, Ethan. We'd be stupid not to do it." Ethan smiled calmly. "Funny thing about that." He stood up from the table. Daniel frowned. "What?" Ethan walked into the living room. When he returned, he placed the family iPad in the center of the table. The message conversation was open. Laura's face went white. Daniel froze. The room fell silent. Laura whispered first. "Ethan, what is this?" Ethan slowly turned the screen toward them. "You tell me." Daniel looked down. The color drained from his face. Laura's hands began shaking. "It's not what it looks like." Ethan laughed quietly. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like you and my brother planning to steal my house." Daniel pushed back his chair. "You're overreacting." Ethan reached into a folder beside him. Then he slammed it onto the table. Printed screenshots spilled across the surface. "Am I?" Daniel flipped through the pages. Each one worse than the last. Laura began crying. "Ethan, please?" Ethan stared at both of them. "You spent months planning my destruction." Then he leaned back in his chair. "But you made one mistake." Laura wiped her eyes. "What mistake?" Ethan smiled slowly. "You assumed I was stupid." He slid another document across the table. "The house. It's already in a legal trust." Daniel's eyes widened. "The savings account? Moved last week." Laura's voice trembled. "You're lying." Ethan shook his head. "No." Then he pointed to the screenshots. "And those messages? My lawyer already sent them to both of your employers." Daniel went completely pale. Because Laura worked at a bank. And Daniel worked at a financial advisory firm. Both companies had strict ethics policies. Their scheme wasn't just immoral. It was financial fraud. The kind that destroys careers. 6 months later, Laura and Daniel weren't together anymore. Both had lost their jobs. Their relationship collapsed the moment the money disappeared. Ethan moved into a smaller house outside the city. It wasn't as big as the old place, but it felt peaceful. One evening Emma asked him a question. "Dad, Why don't we see Uncle Daniel anymore? Ethan paused for a moment. Then he smiled gently. Because sometimes, the people you trust the most turn out to be the ones you should trust the least. And thanks to one forgotten device on the coffee table, the shared iPad had revealed everything.